All right, in this video we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations. So solution to an equation can be referred to as three different things. One, the solution. Two, it can be called a zero, or it can also be called a root of the related function. So a zero, root, solution all mean the same thing. We're going to look through 5 quick examples, one of each way that we know how to solve quadratics, factoring, extracting square roots, completing the square, using the quadratic formula, and graphing. So let's just jump straight into this. I don't want this video to be too long. So we want to solve 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. This is example 1, so this is going to be by factoring. I don't care which method you use to factor. You can factor just by looking at it. Some people can do that. Some people have to do the AC method, some people the box method. I don't care. Find a way that you know how to factor and go with it. The way I like to factor with these is the AC method. So I like to, you take the first term, you take the third term, so a and c, if you're thinking about ax squared plus bx plus c, multiply those together, we're going to get negative 4. Look at your middle term, it's going to be negative 3. So we want multiples of negative 4 that are going to add to negative 3. So if we think about negative 4 times 1, negative 4 plus 1, this is going to equal negative 4. This is going to be negative 3. So negative 4 and 1 are the numbers I want to use. So we rewrite this to x squared. Instead of having negative 3x's, we're going to have a negative 4x and a positive 1x. Minus 2 equals 0. Then we want to group our first two terms and our second two terms together. We have a 2x in common here, leaving us with x minus 2. We have a 1 in common here, leaving us with x minus 2. Now this first term and this second term have an x minus 2 in common, so we can factor out an x minus 2, leaving us with x minus 2 times 2x plus 1 equals 0. Then we have to take advantage of the zero product property, which means if I have something times something equals 0, each of those factors sets equal to 0. So we know either x equals 2 or x equals negative 1/2. So subtract 1, divide by 2. Naturally, you should go back, check your answers, but in the interest of time, we are going to move on. Second type of problem that we can deal with is going to be extracting square roots. So if you have something like this, 2x minus 1 to the second power equals 9, you could, if you wanted to, distribute this stuff out, right? Squared just means multiply it by itself. Distribute that out, subtract 9, do what we did on the last problem. Or, since this is a 9, it's a perfect square, we can just simply get rid of the square by taking a square root on each side. The thing to be careful with is the square root of 9 is not 3. The square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. Make sure you remember to get both of those. So we're going to get 2x minus 1 equals 3, 2x minus 1 equals negative 3, and then we can solve from there. So add 1, so x equals 2, or x equals, what, negative 1 over here, is that right? And again, we would want to check to make sure that these things work, but again, in the interest of time, we're going to move on. Next type of problem is going to be everybody's favorite, completing the square. So off to the side here, I'll kind of keep a list of the steps we want to take to complete the square. So the first thing we're going to want to do, first thing I would actually do is make sure I can factor it. If I can factor it, I'm not going to complete the square. Spoiler alert, you cannot factor this. So the first thing we want to do is move c. So we're going to get 4x squared minus 20x equals negative 17. Second thing we want to do is make sure a equals 1. So right now a is 4. We want a to be 1, so we want to divide everything by 4. So x squared minus 5x equals negative 17 over 4. And we're just going to keep it that way. We're not going to try to simplify anything. Next thing we want to do is b divided by 2. And then we want to square that. So in this case here, b is negative 5 halves. Squared is going to be positive 25 fourths. So 4 is going to be add step 3 to both sides. So x squared minus 5x plus 25 fourths equals negative 17 plus 25 fourths is going to be negative 2. Right, so 3 is going to get us up to 20, and then 5 more is going to be 8. So it's negative 8 fourths. So 2. I'm sorry, not negative 8 fourths, that's positive 8 fourths. So let's get rid of that negative sign. This is going to be positive 2. Step 5 is going to be factor. And if you do this correctly, you don't have to think about how this thing factors. What you square, in this case negative 5 halves, is always going to be here. So negative 5 halves, so it's x minus 5 halves. If this were a positive 5 halves, this would say x plus 5 halves. Then we want to solve using our square roots. So take the square root of each side. X minus 5 halves equals plus or minus radical 2. We can't really simplify that, so we'll just keep it there. Last thing we need to do is add 5 halves, so x equals 5 halves plus or minus radical 2. So here's your steps. Oops. Get this back where it should be. Here are your steps for completing the square if you have forgotten. If you don't like completing the square, don't ever want to complete the square, you can use your quadratic formula. This is not Algebra 2. You will not get a formula sheet. You need to know your quadratic formula. So it's the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now this is only going to work if our equation is set equal to 0. Right now it's set equal to 5, so we need to subtract 5 from each side first. So a is going to be 3, b is going to be negative 6, c is going to be negative 5. So if we plug these things into our quadratic formula, the opposite of negative 6 is 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 6 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 5. All of that over 2 times 3. This is going to turn out to be 6 plus or minus the square root of 96 over 6. I don't like square root of 96. I want us to be able to simplify that. So if we think about 96 being equal to 16 times 6, the square root of 96 then would be the square root of 16 times 6, which is the square root of 16 times the square root of 6. So we're going to be looking at 6 plus or minus 4 radical 6 over 6. Still not finished because 6, 4, and 6 have a common factor of 2. So we can simplify this a little bit and say 3 plus or minus 2 radical 6 over 3. So that would be our answer here. Again, you have to know your quadratic formula. Not going to be given to you. Last but not least is graphing. You need to know how to graph, solve equations by graphing. So 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. This is the same exact question as the first one, so we know the answers should be negative 1/2 and 2. But let's run through how we actually do this on a calculator if you don't remember how. So here's our home screen. I'm just going to go to y equals. I'm going to plug in the equation we have. So 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. I'm going to go and hit zoom 6 to get our standard viewing window. So it's going to go from -10 to 10 on each axis. Now you can see our parabola there. Now remember from the first slide that a solution is also going to be a root or a zero. So we're trying to find the roots, the zeros, the x-intercept, the solution, whatever you want to call it. So we have one here. We have one right here. Now I don't want you guessing. How we're going to find these is we're going to hit second calc. Everything that you will do with a graph is going to be under the second calc menu. So we're trying to find a zero. So option 2. Now, when it says left bound, that means you want to pick an x value to the left of the number you're trying to find. So if we're trying to find this one here, clearly where I'm blinking is to the right of that value. So we're going to hit left a couple times. Now I'm blinking on the left side of that 0. So hit enter. Right bound means the same thing, but just to the right. So go to the right of it, hit enter. Guess means get close to it, and hit enter again. And boom, -1/2. I'm going to leave the other one up to you because this video is already long enough. Make sure you know how to do it. Make sure you get 2 for your answer. So that'll be it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.